Hey guys, we're going to talk about a few things today. As always, if you like the content, subscribe, hit the like button. Also, bam, it comes in purple. So when you're feeling harder than Mega Armor, feel free to hit the Teespring store in the link below. We've got some themed merch. It is growing. It's not perfect yet, but it is getting there and it's growing. Today we're going to talk about, I'm going to have two videos today actually. The first one's going to talk about Mathhammer and the problems that it imposes. That's where we're going to start. Second one is going to be a continued reaction on the Orc Codex, and I'm sure everybody's fucking tired of hearing me talk about it. But I've just had a lot more affirmations that Codex is arguably bad. So we'll go over that in the second video. I'm not going to go over it right now. All right, where do we begin? Mathhammer. What is Mathhammer? So Mathhammer is a term that is used to reflect the math behind different units. I'm going to lower that a little bit. So like, there's even websites dedicated for it. You can put in the stat line, you can put in the target stat line, and it'll crunch out the numbers and give you what your statistical averages would be, how much damage you could expect to do on average, stuff like that. It's a good tool. It's a good tool, but that's all it is. It should not be the end-all be-all that you base your decisions on, because it's A, dice game, and B, statistics don't mean shit in dice games, and C, we don't play in a vacuum. So there's a lot of things that Mathhammer won't take into account. You know, and again, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to bring up some Orc units because that's the Codex I know the best, and that's why. You know, there were a lot of players that were doing Mathhammer on Ludas, whatever. Was going to make a joke. Decided to keep it in good taste. Going to keep the joke to myself. Ludas are good. You know, they're a good unit. So, because this dude did the math on it, and he was like, you can kill this many Primaris boys, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's you know, that's fair. You know, if you've got 10 Ludus, which is 170 points worth of models, they're going to put out 30 shots. If they're hitting on 5s, they're going to net 10 hits. And then their strength 7, so out of those 10 hits against a Primaris unit, you're wounding on 3s, they're going to get roughly, what, 6 to 7 wounds, somewhere in there. And of those 6 to 7 wounds, they're going to fail half of them, so 3-ish. So you're going to kill 3 Primaris models. Any 2 wound Marine models, doesn't have to be Primaris. So yeah, cool, man. Like, you're right. Mathematically, that's how that's going to work. Here's the problem with that. You just dumped a 170 point unit into a unit so that you could kill 60 points worth of models. It's not efficient at all. We don't play in a vacuum. So, because we don't play in a vacuum, unless your board is devoid of terrain, your opponent isn't very good, or they're very inexperienced, or they're just blatantly retarded, rarely are you going to have the opportunity to just shoot 10 Ludas at a squad of Marines that's not going to either A, be in some kind of cover, B, have some kind of penalty to hit, or C, have some other kind of bonus there to help make them survivable or make it harder for you to shoot them. What do I mean by that? So, like, I can't speak for other venues. I don't know what other GTs do. I don't know what other tournament venues do. My boards are dense. We usually have anywhere from 14 to 18 pieces of terrain on the board. I always have at least 2 pieces of -1 to hit, and they're usually somewhere towards the center of the board. My philosophy on board building is you should not be able to shoot from one deployment zone to the other unimpeded. That doesn't mean there won't be some narrow lanes in there, but generally speaking, you should have to move out of your deployment zone to get most of your army to shoot. And by and large, unimpeded means obscuring, blocking line of sight, some -1 to hits. Your opponent should have some +1 to armor saves in there for their infantry. So it doesn't mean like complete line of sight is blocked off, but it generally means that you should not be hitting on flat ballistic skill from one deployment zone to the other. So with dense boards in mind, you're gonna basically have those guys on a 2-up save against most Ludifier, or the Orc player is going to be hitting on 6s. So your Mathhammer just became irrelevant because now you're hitting 5 times instead of 10 times, and you're wounding 2 times instead of 3 times, and you're killing maybe 1 Marine on average. So it's one of those where, by all means, this is a good tool to have to help you make informed and educated decisions and stuff. But it should not be the litmus test for whether or not a unit is good, whether or not it's not good, so on and so forth. Storm Boys are fucking terrible. They're 11 points a model for an Orc Boy on a jump pack. Cool. Like, there's no invuln save there. There's no real save there. It's just a t-shirt. So it's actually just an Orc Boy with a 12-inch movement that flies but gets deep strike. So them by themselves in a vacuum, terrible unit. However, their ability to come in a 5-man squad and to inherently deep strike makes Octarius Data a much more scoreable secondary, because it's one of the few small squads that you can deep strike in the Orc Codex. So their value goes up drastically, knowing that you can pinpoint these 5-man squads into corners in order to score points. So, the idea that Mathhammer is this thing that we all need to adhere to in order to understand how to play the game is silly. And a good analogy to this would be, I'm a basketball fan, I always have been, not so much anymore because most of the NBA is kind of booty now. And a lot of that has to do with analytics. Analytics are slowly killing basketball. And there's some teams that are getting away with it, or getting away from it. But we can take a look at the Houston Rockets over the last 10 years. They've had Coach Mike D'Antoni up until he may still be the coach. I don't know. Like I said, I stopped paying attention 2019-ish. But they had James Harden, Mike D'Antoni, and they just played analytics-focused, most efficient basketball, and they never won a championship. Why did they never win a championship? Because analytics will only carry you so far, because they just can't account for the randomness that happens inside a game. They can't account for whether or not a referee, for example, is going to call a foul, because they found that the most efficient way to play the game was to just lob threes and draw fouls. That's it. So their games were super boring to watch. Nobody gave a shit about watching Rockets games because they were boring. And basically the whole game consisted of a bunch of dudes shooting 3-pointers and then James Harden shooting free throws. The reason that never translated into a championship is because typically in the playoffs, the refs relax their whistles. So you're playing an efficient brand of basketball, but you can't account for all the variables, and one of those variables actually hinders your brand of basketball. So it's just kind of to illustrate the point that you can't just focus on the analytics side of things, because you can't possibly plan for every eventuality, every scenario, every variable. Am I gonna be shooting something that is neg-1 to hit? The Ludas example is a good one. Yes, they could in theory do a lot of damage to a squad or even a vehicle at strength 7 neg-1. I mean, they're effectively autocannons. At strength 7 neg-1, 2 damage, you could do enough shots at 3 shots each that if you roll well, you're gonna shred something, and that's fair. The problem is that they still have a 6-up save. So that 170 point unit, you now have to either invest in a transport for them to ride in so they don't just get blown off the board, or you also have to maybe invest in like a big mech so that they can get an invuln. So there's a lot of things there that your Mathhammer doesn't account for. What good is that 10-man or 20-man Luda squad when I've got a whirlwind, for example? Let's say you've got a 20-man Luda squad and I hit you with a whirlwind you now just picked up 3 or 4 orcs, and that's a very failable leadership because of the way they interact, and now you just lose another 3 or 4 orcs, and your Mathhammer just went to shit because you lost, 8 boys because you didn't plan for this eventuality. So I'm a look and feel guy more than an analytics guy. I do use like statistics and probability to help me kind of make decisions. But at the end of the day, it's a look and feel. Like everything has to look and feel good to me. And there's probably some sort of like subconscious analytical thing going on there that I'm not aware of. But I just wanted to address this real quick because, you can run the most efficient army in the world, but it's not going to matter if you can't work around and plan around your terrain, your opponent, your board, and what's efficient against one army may not be efficient against another. Again, using that Primaris example, yeah, Ludas are going to be effective and efficient at killing Primaris. However, they're not going to really do much at, being effective against Drukhari. Sure, I'm wounding them on 2s, but they're 1 wound, so it's a lot of wasted damage. And in addition to that, like, they have access to a lot of neg 1 to hits. So it's like, what's efficient for this army may not be efficient for that army. So stop using Mathhammer as the end-all be-all on whether or not a unit is good, and understand that most units have a function and a purpose. You just have to be able to think outside the box to put those units to work for you. I'm actually going to wrap this up, so it's going to be a super short video today. Hooray! And then the next one will go up not too long after this.